the trauma and, being in the hospital for 10 days and all of the different surgeries, that I had to have and all of that was very traumatic on the body, but it was also for me very traumatic mentally and emotionally as well. I'm not going to say that I was a negative person before, but I would say I was a pretty pessimistic person before. And what that program that I took showed me was there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's kind of what I took with me through that healing process. Not only the physical healing process, but the mental and emotional healing process as well. The thing that I always tell everyone is it's not too late to pivot, no matter what stage of life that you're in. Whether you're 25 or 75, it's not too late to pivot.
We talk a lot about resilience and reinvention, but we often miss how life's unexpected turns can redefine our entire relationship with passion and purpose. I've seen people cling to identities tied to careers or abilities only to feel lost when those are stripped away. Or folks who face setbacks and think, this is the end, not realizing it might be the beginning of something even more aligned. These aren't just personal crises, they're invitations to rewrite our stories.
And those invitations can feel like betrayals at first. I've worked with athletes who have suffered career-ending injuries and entrepreneurs who have lost everything essentially overnight. The common thread? A moment when the universe says what you thought was your path is gone, and now what? It's not just about bouncing back, it's about discovering a new way forward, one you might never have considered otherwise.
We teach people to fear change. A failed test means that you're bad at math. A lost job erases self-worth. The message? You're only valuable on the expected path.
Stigmatizing reinvention steals resilience. A sommelier loses taste and is told it's time to retire, not reimagine. A chef can't stand for long hours and is pushed out. We call pivots failures, not creative acts.
This isn't about overcoming or normal. It's asking who taught you your worth is tied to one version of you. Quitting isn't a lack of grit, it's a reflex from a world that values consistency over authenticity.
Today we're breaking down how to embrace the unexpected and find joy in the detours. We'll cover why I don't recognize my life anymore isn't a failure, it's the first step to rewriting our story. How to grieve what's lost without getting stuck there. The quiet power of resilience, it's not about bouncing back but adapting. And lastly, the mindset shifts that turns setbacks into setups.
To guide us, we're honored to welcome Nick Elliott. Nick is a certified sommelier, former winemaker, classically trained chef, and a charismatic force behind The Wine Guy, a brand dedicated to making wine approachable, fun, and unforgettable.
With over 30 years of experience, he's hosted tastings, curated wine tours, and even survived a career-threatening accident that reshaped his entire relationship with work, identity, and his resilience.
But what truly sets Nick apart is his ability to turn adversity into adventure. When life forced him to pivot, he didn't just adapt, he redefined what it means to share joy through wine.
Whether he's hosting his podcast, guiding wine cruises, or being a devoted dad and husband, Nick embodies the power of embracing the unexpected. Nick, welcome to the show.
All right. So before we get started, those of you who are not new to the show, you know I am on a lifelong journey and mission to #BeHuman, really destigmatize the human experience for us. Nick, I'm going to actually do something a little bit different. I think your story is your Be Human moment. So can you go ahead and in sharing your #BeHuman, if you could please go ahead and tell us about your story and your human moment.
Yeah, absolutely. This happened back actually on Father's Day of 2022. I, for many years, was an avid motorcyclist. I've been riding motorcycles since I was, 14, 15 years old. My wife and son and I took a trip cross country on our motorcycles, and it was in Mobile, Alabama, when we were on our way to one of our day trips, that I was in a pretty horrific accident. There was debris in the road, and long story short, my bike went down, I went down, and wound up taking an ambulance to the hospital.
Glad you're here to tell us the story today, though.
I am as well. The trauma and being in the hospital for 10 days and all of the different surgeries that I had to have and all of that was very traumatic on the body, but it was also for me very traumatic mentally and emotionally as well, because it really was something that I loved doing, not only for myself, but we did it as a family, and so on. And I was able to mentally recover from that loss relatively quickly. And I attribute it to a program that I actually had taken a few months before the accident happened, so in April of that same year. And that course was all about mindset and communication and learning to be in the moment and be in yourself and so on. So the recovery, yeah, my father-in-law to this day still calls me a miracle because he said I should have been, in the hospital for a month, and and just mentally and emotionally, it could have been a much harder time than it was if I didn't gain the knowledge that I did in that program, because I'm not going to say that I was a negative person before, but I would say I was a pretty pessimistic person before. And what that program that I took showed me was there's always a light at the end of the tunnel. And that's kind of what I took with me through that healing process, not only the physical healing process, but the mental and emotional healing process as well.
I have so many notes and thoughts, but that's really cool. I always say that what we're trying to do in Undo, and I don't know if you know much about us, but we're trying to get mental health curriculum out. My target demographic is always going to be the next gen, because proactive mental health anything is always so much better than my journey where I had to do it reactively and try to put a Band-Aid on it afterwards.
Yes.
So to see as an adult that really direct connection so close together in a timeline is such an incredible experience for you to be able to have. But also just speaks so much to our mission. Okay, I have to know, because we live in Colorado in a space where we do not have helmet laws. And in order for me to fully understand this whole story, I must know, were you wearing a helmet? I'm afraid to ask.
I was wearing a helmet. We were in Alabama at the time, which does have a helmet law. We were coming from Pensacola, Florida. Florida does not have a helmet law. However, I I made it a conscious choice when I started riding motorcycles that I was always, always, always going to wear a helmet.
Same.
I love it.
And my helmet has saved my life twice.
I was literally just going to say that exact same thing. I was going to say, you don't know this about me, but I'm actually married to a police officer. So he
Okay.
has kept together far too many skulls. I honestly could not. You want to talk about why he goes to therapy? It is holding in brains. I'm assuming you were also alone on the bike, it sounds like.
I was alone on my motorcycle. My wife and my son were behind me on her motorcycle, and they got to watch the whole thing happen.
I gotta ask, do you guys still ride?
We don't.
Figured.
Yeah, we don't. My in-laws made me promise that they would never have to go through that again, and that their daughter would never have to go through that again. Their grandson would never have to go through that again, and I would never have to go through that again.
And I'll bet there's even some grief with that. Like, it's an identity of I ride, and then to be like, oh, that's gone. You can't just empty it out. You got to replace it with something that. And I'm thinking that's probably where we're kind of going today.
Yeah, and that's exactly right. That's what I was alluding to earlier, because that in and of itself was a huge loss for me, because there's a whole community that I lost, in my brothers and sisters who I rode with, and so on, and I don't have that anymore.
So you have since recreated your sort of vision for life and what this looks like. You've had to find potentially new hobbies, a new group, and that's taken a lot of mental work. What exactly from the course do you remember specifically, like things that really resonated with you or things that really were super helpful as you were doing your healing recovery process?
Sure. like I said earlier, it a part of the course, there's much more to it, but it's always talking about the light at the end of the tunnel and how your mindset affects every aspect of your life, and how a negative mindset can not only have emotional and mental negative effects on you, but also physical. So tightness in the chest, or a constant headache, or whatever the case might be. So a lot of the Activate is the course, which I can talk more about if you'd like. Concentrated a lot on that. So using my changed mindset on to not be woe is me, because I could have sat in that woe, in that desperation, and in that sadness for a lot longer if I hadn't gained those tools from the Activate course.
I feel like when we have trauma, there's like this fine line that we try to live in, right? Where it's like you don't want to just should yourself and be like negative and all these things. But also, like, as somebody who I think my mom can be, tend to be a little bit positively toxic in certain ways, where she just dismisses all of my emotions and feelings. I find like, finding that sweet spot of like, my feelings are valid, where I'm coming, like this accident or whatever this thing is that really changed my whole life. Like there's a grief process, and I'm okay to go through that. I can grieve the life I thought I was going to have. I've had several physical ailments myself, so I can relate. Like I had to stop skiing and things like that. And, you see your life going down one trajectory and you have to shift. I think, lost a job through this process too. So you had to grieve that. Yeah, but you have to still find that middle ground of like validate my feelings, grieve, go through the process, but understand like at the end of the day, I'm still alive. I still have my family. I still have these things.
Yes.
And for me, when I've gone through hard times, I really focus on like, what is noise in my brain? Is this thought a noise thing for me? Is it helping me to get where I need to go in life? Or is me being woe is me and playing the victim in my own brain actually stopping me from getting further, getting better, moving on to learn the lessons I need to learn in order to like be stronger?
Absolutely.
So your accident forced a total reevaluation of your career. I'll pause on that. What were you doing before this?
So I'm a classically trained chef, as well as a sommelier, a wine expert. So I was building my wine business, and I was going back into the chefing business. The I took a chefing job, and the after effects of the accident kind of they affected me physically to where I was not able to do that anymore.
Huh. So I guess the second part of the question is, and thank you for sharing that, but for someone who's listening who's now facing their now what moment, whether it's due to injury, loss of job, other life disruption, what was your first step toward redefining your life?
I've done a lot of things in my life. I've reset my career multiple times. Through my 48 years, 49 years. Forget how old I am. So what I was able to do is I was able to kind of reach in my little grab bag of experience and pull a few things out, and kind of plug them back in to where I needed them to be. So I was able to kind of re-energize the wine side of what I do. So that's kind of where I took the trajectory.
So can you tell us a little bit about where you're at right now?
Yeah, absolutely. So my business is called The Wine Guy. I'm a wine educator. So I teach people about wine, how to drink wine, how to enjoy wine, how to buy wine, things like that. And more recently, within the last year, what I've started doing is hosting international wine tours. So actually going to wine country in Europe, wine country in Australia, wine country in New Zealand, South Africa, South America, and so on. Of course, here in the States as well, and taking small groups with me and actually experiencing it live on the ground, doing tours, doing tastings, wine and food pairings, things like that.
If you ever need somebody to go along and carry the luggage, I will volunteer. That sounds amazing.
I was going to say, just to write a critique. You can carry the luggage. I'll critique.
Children, I mean, any way I can help, really. I would definitely join you all. Wait, when is this all starting? And I'm assuming you're doing this on social media so everybody can watch, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, please. So I did my first one this past May. I was in Bordeaux in France. So we did a bunch of tasting
That's a good spot
in
to
Bordeaux.
start at.
Yeah,
That's like
absolutely.
the spot you start that kind of job at.
Yeah, right out of the gate, I started off strong. But I've got another river cruise scheduled in November. So
What
I'll
river?
be we'll be on the Rhine and the Mosel.
The Rhine River. I was going to ask.
Mhm.
That's what I figured.
That's a good spot to do it too.
Absolutely. We were on the Garonne River in Bordeaux, the Rhine and the Mosel. So we'll be going through 5 European countries, tasting wine and eating food throughout, starting in Switzerland and ending in Amsterdam, Netherlands, and a bunch of stops in between.
Okay, we're going to promote your website at the end of this. So anybody who's curious, that will all be here. But if our listeners join, we get free tickets, right? That's the promotional agreement we've agreed to here.
I'll send you a case of wine. How about that? I don't know if I can take you on the trip.
That sounds amazing, though. You're living the dream.
I love my job.
So yeah, I'm just so curious about this process of like, I think I'm going to do the chef thing. Now I physically can't. Call it a pivot, call it what you want. What would you tell someone who knows they need to pivot, but they're, I guess the question's kind of asking, paralyzed by grief? How do you help them take that first step?
Sure. And I talk a lot about pivoting on my own podcast as well. Because I have the experience with it so many times. And the thing that I always tell everyone is it's not too late to pivot, no matter what stage of life that you're in. Whether you're 25 or 75, it's not too late to pivot, because especially in this day and age, we have so many options at our fingertips. Options to where we don't even have to leave our house, in order to bring in an income, and within the online space itself, there are millions and millions of options to choose from in the online space. So my advice always starts there is if you're if it's a physical disability or something like that, check out the online space, because the opportunities are absolutely endless there. There are so many companies that are looking for people, and you don't even have to have experience, in whatever the job might be in order to do it.
I also think, like, on top of that, I feel like starting over is such a horrible, saying, because in reality, so I don't know if you know much about my journey, Nick, but I was an educator for 15 years, ended my educational career in a school shooting. I always word it that way, but the truth is I actually took a year off, did a lot of mental health work, and then went back to the classroom for a year. And I did my first lockdown drill and sat in the corner with all of these fifth graders and bawled my eyes out. And they all they were so amazing. They were incredible. I could not have gotten through that moment without these humans, but they are babies. And I just put them through unnecessary additional trauma. And it was in that moment that I was like, I just can't be in a classroom anymore. Like, I don't know if this is ever going to be better. And so I felt very I had a long time where I was just really struggling with my identity. Who am I? I love children. Adults are very challenging. They are not my favorite. I love children. And there's so few jobs where you can actually like feed your own children and still like hang out with children all day long. And so really like it was a total identity shift for me. I was not, I've never started a nonprofit before. I've never been an executive director before. Definitely in a very different role now. And it took a while for me to have I had a lot of imposter syndrome and still obviously always we all do as humans, but it took me a while because I kept getting stuck on this like starting over concept. I was like, but everything I have done for 15 years in my career prior has actually brought me to this point. All of my experience as an educator and what I was capable of doing like skill set wise is great, but also like my ability to talk to humans and share stories and understand, and even the school shooting, like all of these things are not meaningless in what I'm doing right now. And I think, again, coming back to this mindset shift, for me, I think it's so important for us as humans to really think of it as like, this is what my life has been leading up to me doing, like, I don't
The
think I
next
was actually
chapter.
like I always used to say I was made to be a teacher. There's a lot of things I will tell you. I will be the first to be like, I'm really bad at this. I'm really bad at that. Teaching was like my sweet spot. That was like something that was like, yes, I never thought I'd feel that way, in any other thing. But you have to eventually like understand that path, even if that feels like your sweet spot, is leading you to something that's even better, you know? Um, but yeah. Okay. So tell me, also like you went through a mourning process with the job experience. What helped you kind of go through that mourning process? And like I don't know, what did that process look like time wise? Did it take you a long time? Do you feel like because you had this course beforehand, it made it easier for you to really move through that process? And, like for me, it took me a whole year to really go through that process. Tell me more about that actual journey.
Sure. Yeah, mindset certainly had a lot to do with the speed in which I was able to go through that process. On top of everything else, I would also say that I'm a very pragmatic person. Very very black and white and matter of fact. If you will. So when I got to the point where I was like, okay, I'm not going to be able to do this anymore, because I'm standing there, I'm hurting, I'm slow, I cannot I cannot do this job effectively, and a lot of it was also my employer is I want to be able to do the best job that I can, so when it came time to make that decision, I just kind of ripped off the band-aid, understanding that whatever the next chapter was going to be, it might be unclear right now, but because I know I've got all of this material, like I said, all of these tricks
Knowledge
in
and
my bag, yeah, exactly, all of
mm-hmm.
this knowledge, I will be able to move forward in a positive direction.
I love that you're like, I can't this, I can't this, I can't this negative thinking process, but I know deep down I have these skills that really supersede the can I stand on my feet for 12 hours? It's I am adaptable, I have resilience.
Yeah, resiliency is that's what it's all about.
So for someone who's thinking, and I can imagine some listener is, I don't have the energy to start over or to start that next chapter of life. What's one small mind shift that helped you keep going at that time?
Well, I would say, and it's very cliche, but I do think it's apt, is baby steps. Taking it, one little bit at a time, because, starting, and especially starting your own business, there are a lot of steps to make that happen. So I was lucky enough myself to have a little money stashed away, which certainly sped the process up, of getting things off the ground. But baby steps is putting together a business plan and actually deciding what you're going to do, I think is certainly, the big first step, and then how you are going to do it, I think is going to be a very close second to that.
I was just going to add, I think it comes back to also, again, that mindset shift. Like, I don't have the energy to start over. Instead, it's like, how do I take this and transform it? And like, it's just thinking through that a little bit differently. The other thing too, Daren, is you were talking about like strengths versus weaknesses. And I think anytime you start any business, that is a really good spot to start, is like, I am really good at these
What am I
things.
good at?
I am not good at these things, right? And I think
And
this, I say this for
labeling
kids.
that out loud.
Yeah, just being very transparent, and then either filling the gaps where you don't, or finding people who can fill those gaps, things like that. But also really honing in on your strengths and thinking about like, how can I utilize my strengths? And I say this to kids through and through, whether you are doing a math paper or you are trying to rebuild yourself as a human, it's all the same things, right? It's really just making sure you give yourself the grace to go through the process to really establish what you need and want based on your strengths.
Yeah, and I love the point that you made, Aaron, about being honest with yourself, as well. Is I don't know if before all of this I could have been truly honest with myself as far as what I can do and what I can't do, or what I'm good at versus what I'm not.
I think it's some of the hardest work we do as humans, right?
Absolutely. Yeah.
Well, to identify a passion, like just because you like it doesn't mean you're going to necessarily make money with it. Or the framework of there are things that I do have passion for and I can make some money, may not be this much, but just reframing.
Sometimes people have a passion and then they make it a job and then they hate the passion again. So then you're back to sort of that square root with your riding your bike, right? Your motorcycle is like you're kind of killing a passion on you.
Yep. Monetize stuff and it loses enjoyment.
Absolutely.
I think that anytime you're starting a business, the other component too is it oftentimes feels like one step forward, two steps backwards, four steps forward, eight steps backwards, one step forward. Like it's this constant. And I think personally, starting a business is a really big mental health journey. And you have to talk to yourself as nicely as you can, like nicer than you do your best friend, and really give yourself the grace to be able to take those two steps backwards, but learn through it to make sure that the business or whatever you're creating is healthy and safe and good afterwards. But there's so much, back and forth that you have in your brain. I can do this. I shouldn't do this. I should do this. I don't know if I'm capable of doing this. And when you are your own boss, you are the only person who can kind of talk your way out of those cycles, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And something else that I'll add, to that is, if we're lucky enough in our lives, we have people that we can turn to for advice. And don't discount, reaching out to people for advice. Going into entrepreneurship, as you pointed out, Erin, is one of the hardest things a person can do. It's grueling, mentally and sometimes physically, and if we don't necessarily have that business prowess, it's going to be even harder. So if you have someone in your life, or if you're lucky enough to be able to, or able to hire someone, a business coach or something along those lines, I would highly recommend that, because if it's not something that you've done before, it's always a good idea to have a little backup, a little wingman or woman.
So I'm super excited about this next question.
Hit me.
As a sommelier, you rely on senses that could have been compromised after your accident. How did you adapt your craft, and what can that teach others about reinventing their own passions?
Thankfully, my recovery was, or the accident did not affect my olfactory skills, or my, or my taste skills. So what it did affect was, being able to lift a case of wine or, something like that. So it's more of that kind of thing. So, I have to work my way around that a little bit. I'm still ambulatory, but a case of wine weighs 30 pounds, 35 pounds, so, something like that. So, there was those little after effects. But I would say, just like anything, to answer your question, is be adaptable. Don't be afraid to ask for help. I'm lucky enough to have an amazing wife who's very supportive, and she was integral in helping me get my business off the ground, as well, because she's got a brilliant business mind of her own. Asking for help, I think, is very, very important.
So my last year of teaching, I slipped on ice and I ended up having to have 2 surgeries on my wrist. My right wrist, I'm right-handed. So that surgery, or the fall, was in January. So I spent the whole second half of that year actually not really able to write. It was a very bizarre experience being a teacher, not being able to write. But I would say that I went through a grief process for sure. I actually spent 2 years until my second surgery not actually using my thumb. They were finally able to get my thumb working again after 2 years. But I did spend 2 years literally being like, okay, I am never going to use my right thumb again. I will never be able to do this again, So you do go through like grief processes when you have big injuries. And sometimes they really do have to define really big things in your life, because if you lose an arm, you lose a leg, you have to really figure out how to adapt.
This is the iceberg. Like, people see that top little 10% sticking out and go, isn't it great that you own a business, Nick, and you get to go travel to Bordeaux? That sounds amazing. I wish I was you. What they don't see is all that stuff underneath here, accident or not, but like all that work and effort and sleepless nights and conflicts with people and lenders and so forth.
And talking yourself through it.
Yep.
Absolutely. Yeah, and your point about, being a dude, Erin, is, that's a valid point, 100%, because the way that I was raised was not that way, to think about life in the way that I now think about life, and how I move forward with life. So yes, that was certainly something to get over. Something else that was very helpful to me in this Activate course that I took. There was a whole section on communication, and it was basically a lesson on how human beings communicate with one another. And that was a huge thing for me, was learning how to not only communicate what I was feeling and what I was going through and all of that stuff, but also being able to hear what was coming from my family and my friends, and so on. So it also allowed me to communicate a lot better, which I think also sped up the process of the healing, because if I was not able to communicate my feelings physically, emotionally, mentally, as well as I was, I wouldn't have necessarily gotten a lot of the external validation that I needed to help me move forward. People, giving me their sympathy or empathy or whatever you want to call it. And before, it's, I don't want your empathy. Don't, no, I'm okay. I'm fine.
I think innately humans are such poor communicators because they don't understand their own emotions. I think, and I always use the example of anger, right? Like, if my kids leave messes all over the ground, this was actually something that legitimately got me to a mental health facility because I was so frustrated with all of my children's messes during the pandemic. And I did an anger iceberg, and I recognized I'm not angry at my kids for their messes. What I actually am, though, is I feel resented. I feel unheard. I feel unappreciated. I feel ignored. I feel disrespected because when dad says pick up your stuff, they do it, right? Like there's so many other underlying emotions. And if humans understood, in my personal opinion, the nuance of communication, whether it's body language, tone of voice, word choice, whatever, then also understood their own emotions, I truly don't think we would be in this place that we are at as a globe. I think that those are the two biggest challenges. Being in a very, very condensed population of humans is really hard for us to do.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I'll plug the program for a second, and the component that I'm talking about right now is called NLP, or neuro linguistic programming, and it really is a very, very powerful way to have a pretty rapid mindset shift, as well as a communication shift in your life. I believe it made me a better human being. It made me a better father. It made me a better husband. It made me a better uncle. All of that stuff, because I was able to stop allowing my all of the stuff.
So can I ask, do you know by any chance if it's grounded in CBT and DBT? Because to me, it sounds like they got you out of fight, flight, freeze and really got you cognitively in that frontal lobe, cognitively online. Do you know what its basis for that curriculum is?
The program, it goes through a few different curriculums, and NLP was one of those curriculums. I'm not familiar with
I'll have to look it up.
Yeah.
That's okay. No worries.
Yeah.
No worries.
I literally just wrote it down too. I was like, I'm not sure what that one is. Let me write it down and look up later.
I mean, truly, I am certain, all the same. And I think it's really exciting and liberating work, though, right? Like, I think, again, going back to the males in our population, society, I think it's a human right to understand your emotions and how to navigate the diversity of our emotions in a responsible way. But I think it's also equally liberating. Like these dudes that are very like defaulting to anger, and you can see them in society. I always say it's like when you get a new car, nobody has the new car until you get the car and everybody has it, right? You like start to understand like how to tell if somebody's here versus here, and then you see it in society. And I want to go up to some of these guys and be like, process your emotions. I promise you, if you just get through the emotions processing and get to that frontal lobe, you will feel liberated, because nobody likes feeling like they're messing up all the time. I personally have bipolar and ADHD, and I always say that they are very well managed because of these skills that I learned. And so I see it in myself. Like before I learned this stuff, I always say bipolar is like being in a pressure cooker, like, I don't know if you guys know pressure cookers, you know what I'm talking about? Okay, cool. I always say it's like being in a pressure, and Instapot, yeah, it's like being in a pressure cooker, and all of a sudden you just kind of burst. And now it's much more contained. I can spend like 20 minutes in my bathroom just screaming a bunch of curse words, and my husband's like, okay, Erin will be back. Mommy will go cook dinner in a minute. Don't worry. But, before it was like, I didn't know what was happening, and I couldn't understand how to regulate it. And I felt so many emotions that I couldn't even like name or process or fix or work through. Like I just felt like I was constantly dysregulated, and it's so liberating to now say and do the things I mean to be saying and doing. And I can name like, oh, this is why I did that thing. That emotion made me feel this way, right? And I think, again, it's a human right. I think everybody on this planet should deserve to understand that feeling of really getting into that frontal lobe and being cognitively online.
Yeah, I would say, going into that program that I did in 2022, I was the only male in that class, which at first turned me off a little bit, and then I went from, being disappointed about that to, wondering why that is, and so on, and, to finally just acceptance, the stages of grief, or whatever you want to call it, but I also at the same time found that very sad, that not more men go after that kind of thing because we need it
Just as much.
as women do.
And
100%.
if you're sitting out there being like, no, I don't, you do.
Guess what? You do. Yes.
Yeah, I'm not trying to be pejorative, but like that actually is the message. Like 50%, roughly 50% of the population's like, "Mm." And I'm not a touchy-feely guy either, but it's like, I'm
You
at least
don't have
aware
to
of.
be, though. And I think that's
There's
the
a difference. That's the
stereotypes.
point. Yeah.
That's the stereotype that we need to battle in this, right? Like, I'm actually not, like, even for a woman, I am also not very, like, sentimental or any of those things. But when I feel misunderstood, I cry really hard. So it's not even like a touchy-feely emotion that I have to tackle in order to get cognitively online, right? But I think the other thing too is, so many of our male population has gotten this sort of messaging or this narrative that you have to stop thinking with your emotions and think logically. And scientifically, that is not how our brains work. Like that is just, you have to, like, I'm going to go through some brain stuff really quickly. You're in fight, flight, freeze. That's where your thoughts initiate, is in your caveman part of your brain. Once you process, if you act there, you're going to make really big mistakes, things you don't want to make. I promise you. We always do. If you continue to process your emotion and you let your brain catch up a little bit to what's going on around you and you collect the details and you start to think through what are my best choices now, you might get stuck here in this middle part of your brain. That's where you get very emotionally reactive. You project, you blame, you don't take accountability. I think of a certain somebody who is, we're talking about files right now. He's stuck right here. We are talking frontal lobe, right? When you get to that frontal lobe is where you are actually cognitively online, making the choices you mean to be making. But you cannot get there until you actually process those emotions. So emotions, again, are also like communication for us. They are things that we should be listening to. If I'm feeling stressed, I should listen to that stress and say, what is stressing me out? How can I solve this? And maybe it's something as simple as my children need to go to bed every single night at a single time, like at a structured time in summertime. I don't know, right? It could be something so easy, but if I am not listening to the emotion and I'm not examining that emotion and processing what's causing that emotion, I am never going to get to a real solution that is actually directly correlated to the emotion. So any dudes who are out there, I promise you, the people around you will be thankful if you go to therapy. I promise you it's not so bad.
All right. So I am looking at our time. I know Erin has one more big question. Nick, we just wanted to say thank you. And if you can answer maybe this one more question for Erin, I'd really appreciate that.
It'll be my pleasure.
All right, Nick, if you could rewrite one rule about how society views reinvention or resilience, what would it be?
That all of the noise, all of everything that's coming from externally into you, the questions, the comments, the culture, the tradition, all of that stuff, none of that matters. The only thing that matters is what's here and what's here. So that is how we begin to reinvent ourselves. Whether that's in a job or as a human being or as a father or as a husband, whatever the case may be, is the only thing that matters is you, and putting that out there, whatever that might be, and not allowing, again, your culture, society, or norms, or the internet, or whatever is telling you not to do it, to do it.
In other words, resiliency doesn't have to look like, ooh, like the way, it can be really resetting that mind and really thinking through, like, I am being resilient because it's one step forward, two steps backwards, one step forward, two steps backwards. I am resilient because I'm not allowing my brain to maybe take me down a bad rabbit hole, right? Resilience doesn't have to deal with muscles and, how strong and capable you are physically. It really can be about how you persevere through our hardest internal battles.
Yeah, 100% is, being resilient in life is, I think it's one of the best things you can be as a human being. And unfortunately, there are a lot of us out there who don't have the resiliency because, I mean, is it a side effect of self-esteem or the way you were raised? You don't feel like you can get to that next step. Um, Whatever it might be is but you'll never know until you try, and I think that's what stops a lot of people is they're not willing to take that leap. And I think it was Michael Jordan said you miss 100% of the throws you don't make.
And just to name it, but being human is really uncomfortable, right? So resiliency is like literally the only way we can do it day to day because it doesn't get easier. You just process it better. But being human is really uncomfortable. All right. So thank you so much, Nick, for joining us today and your incredible work. When we first got on and I was like, wine, mental health, I'm not sure how this is going to jive, but it was a really great conversation. We're really glad that we had you on here. If viewers and listeners want to connect with you, how can they do so?
Great place to start is my website. So it's thewineguy.vin. That's VIN, like wine, VIN. And I'm all over social media, TikTok, Instagram, Facebook. Just look for The Wine Guy. You'll see my little cartoon, my little wine guy cartoon. And I would love if you guys wouldn't mind to share the link to the company that I did the program with. So I would love to put that out there as well in the show notes or whatever, because I think it would be amazingly helpful to everyone out there to go through the process that I went through. The company's called Genius Unlocked, and the specific program that I'm talking about is called Activate, which is it's a part coaching program and a part self-discovery / self-motivation program. So I would love to share that with all of your listeners.
Thank you again, Nick.
Thank you, Daren. Great to meet you both. Thank you, Erin.
And to everyone listening or watching, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and turn on post notifications so you never miss an episode. If you're listening on your favorite podcast directory, leave us a 5-star rating and review, please. If you have expertise in the mental health world, education, social justice, or just generally jive with us and want to join us on the show, feel free to email Jay at unplugged@undomindset.org with Undo Mindset as the subject line. We're always looking for voices like yours to really amplify. And don't forget, share this episode with someone who might find it helpful. Getting the word out is one of the best ways in which we can really support our mission and help us grow. We truly appreciate you engaging in our podcast, so all engagement is welcomed. Thank you so much and take care.